הוציאנו ממצרים, ולא עשה בהם משפטים. לא עשה בהם משפטים, ולא עשה באלוהיהם. לא עשה באלוהיהם, ולא הרג את בכוריהם.
Praise Yah, Shabbat Shalom. Here we go. How about another introductory note as people come on? Thank you for everyone that has come on.
Feasts of Israel, God's holy days, commemorated by the children of Israel and fulfilled by the Lamb of God. That's how we got out of Egypt. Almighty God said to put the blood on the doorposts of the house.
for you. Do this in remembrance of me.
Other nights. On other nights, we can eat regular bread. Tonight, why do we eat only matzah?
It is now time to tell the story of the Passover. The prophecies had been set in motion, which brought forth unprecedented times for God's children. Civil unrest and food shortages were ever increasing.
Telling the story. Whoops. Get rid of that. That was from Pure Light Ministries, and the other video was from Our Jewish Roots. So thank you for those channels. You could do without the deathly screams, man. I like that part. I think that's great. That highlights today in the month of Aviv, you are leaving the house of bondage into freedom, into liberty. This is our liberty. This is our deliverance as we come towards Passover. We're not there yet. This is not Passover. Yes, Hebrew roots, not exactly Jewish. I understand that. And so we're leaving out of bondage, as many people think that we're going back under bondage. But no, this is the celebration of our freedom and deliverance and salvation in Messiah, which we are just now 4 days away from, really. 11th day of the first month, Shabbat Shalom, 11, 12, 13, 14, and then at evening. So about 4 days away from this celebration. We're going to be picking up on our being unleavened, removing leaven out of our lives. We're picking up on that, what we left off on. Make sure we cover the rest of the Torah, the law, the instruction of doing this feast, so that we're all prepared ahead of time, that's kind of my goal, is to prepare people ahead of time. That way when you go into the feast, you're not all wondering what's going on. But I'll go ahead and open us in a word of prayer, and then we shall begin. Heavenly Father, Yahuwah Elohim, thank you for another Sabbath day, another Shabbat, where we can be in this time with you, appointed by you, meeting with you, looking to honor and worship you, set aside time directed towards you. Help us in this study as we go forward to understand the things we're studying, and just that your Ruach HaKodesh would be present with us in this Sabbath study. Thank you for all the listeners that are here with us, with me and Zemi, and may they be edified through this study. In Yahushua HaMashiach's name, amen. Forgot that fan might be making some background noise, so got that stopped. Shabbat Shalom, Jeremiah's little sister, Windfeather, Jeremy, Pepper Moon, Shemaiah, William, Shabbat Shalom and welcome everybody. So are we ready? Are we almost ready? I know me and Zemi will be leaving tomorrow for Tennessee, where we're going to keep the Passover. But a couple introductory notes. The Old Testament is the New Testament concealed. The New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. Important. Say that again. The Old Testament is the New Testament concealed. The New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. So just a good little important note, reminder of how these things go hand in hand, how they overlap, and how one doesn't do away with the other. And then the spirit of the law does not negate the letter of the law. The spirit of the law does not negate the letter of the law. And let's see, one example would be, do not muzzle the ox as it treads out the grain. That's quoted in the New Testament as having a spiritual meaning that had to do with the laborer is worthy of his hire, and applying that to the minister, as the apostles labored to tell the gospel story, that they would not be shorted out of being provided with food and water and everything. And once you understand, oh, that's the spirit of the law, well, is it okay to now you can muzzle the ox when it treads out the grain? No, of course not. It's still law. You're supposed to let the ox be able to eat some of its work that it's doing for you. So that's one example. Of course, the other things has to do with love. Because you love your neighbor, you won't rape his wife. You love your neighbor, you won't murder them. You love your neighbor, you won't steal from them. That's the black and white. The spirit of the law might take us even deeper. Love your neighbor as yourself. What would you do for your neighbor in looking at them and saying, that's me? That's almost as if they are you. And to what levels would you go out of your way to love them as yourself? Well, you wouldn't maybe just check a list. Well, I haven't murdered, I haven't taken his wife, but you might even go further. And so the spirit of the law does not negate the letter of the law. Just some good little introductory notes I wanted to open up with. And I'm gonna take this Shabbat Shalom thing down because it's okay. So where did we leave off? We went over lechem, bread, food, continuing this concept of bread and becoming unleavened. Manna. We went over the Hebrew words for bread last week. Could even be kasef, silver, money, breadwinner, pat, fragment, bit, morsel, challah. We went over challah, which is that famous bread that it's good for breaking. That's sacrificial bread. And then And then the main areas of focus were matzah, unleavened bread, seor, and that's the leaven or sourdough starter, and chametz, that which is leavened. And we discussed all that last week, as those were the three main bread words for us to learn: matzah, seor, chametz. What else? I used this guy, Olive Branch, and I'm actually referring to him again today. And also Yahweh's Restoration Ministry. Let's see. Chametz is any food product made from wheat, barley, rye, oats, or spelt that has come into contact with water and been allowed to ferment and rise. That's Chabad.org. And so, you know, we're getting rid of we're eating up these Belvita crackers, because this has whole grain blend, rolled oats, rye flakes, enriched flour, wheat flour. So all kinds of grain in this, but then even corn and barley. But it has baking soda and disodium phosphate, which makes it rise and make it more of a puffy cracker. So that's something to learn. You wouldn't really think of a cookie as leaven, but it has risen. It is chametz, even though it doesn't use traditional seor leaven. Passages containing chametz, there it is, Exodus 12:19. 7 days shall there be no seor leaven found in your houses, for whosoever eateth that which is leaven, chametz, even that soul shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he be a stranger or born in the land. So very serious. This is very serious, and we'll go over the spiritual implications here, as this is the jots and tittles. And let's see, what else? Oh, I forgot. The Bread of Life by Sue Becker, if you're able to watch that one. That's an important video to understand more about bread. Passages containing chametz. Leviticus 2:11, no grain offering, that's meat is another word for grain offering, which ye shall bring unto Yahuwah, shall be made with leaven. For you shall burn no leaven, seor, nor any honey in any offering of Yahuwah made by fire. And that was one of the examples of chametz and leaven, or chametz and seor side by side. And that's a good time to bring up another point, and this one came again from, let's see, this one I believe it was. Yes, Olive Branch. I loved this point and had to share it about no grain offering or sacrifice containing leaven. Romans 12. I call upon you, therefore, brothers, through the compassion of Elohim, to present your bodies a living offering or sacrifice, set apart, which is pleasing to Elohim, your reasonable service or reasonable worship, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable will of Elohim. I thought that was such a great point that our body is a sacrifice. We got to remove the leaven out of our bodies to be a presentable living sacrifice, because as we look to the old sacrificial system, we need to have a more full understanding of a spiritual, modern day, New Testament ways of sacrifice. So that was such a good point. Had to share that one real quick. Let's see. Take that away. And then seor, we found, is a piece of highly fermented or acidic dough or any other grain-derived leaven product that might be used to leaven dough, much like our own sourdough starter. Chametz, any grain-derived food product that has been leavened by seor, or a leavening agent, whether that be natural or chemical. So this one would be a chemical leavened grain, leavened bread, but more natural would be the lump of dough that you set aside and you let it ferment, and then you stick that into your bread and it makes it rise. And so for those of us that understand bread, that would be the thing that you would have to throw out, would be a grain-based leaven, a grain-based seor. And there it is. And there's your chametz. These are what we got to get rid of. Other examples. Let's see, just mute my computer. Those would be other examples, which hopefully you don't have those things in your cupboards anyway. But these are grain-based products with chemical leavening agents. They're chametz. An example of leavening agents that would make a product chametz, so that this is chametz. These top ones would be, you'd want to get rid of probably. These would be a grain base, meaning it's made from grain. That's how it's made, so you would want to get, that would be like the sourdough starter. You may not have to throw out all yeast. I wouldn't say you would have to throw out your baking powder and baking soda. I wouldn't consider, or if you had any of these things, that alone by itself, I would not consider that leaven. But if it was a grain-based yeast leavening agent, that would be grain-based. You would not want to have that seen with you. And it's not the feast of unleavened toothpaste. Because you'd start being to where you'd be throwing out your toothpaste and everything. But it's the feast of unleavened bread, and the focus is on eating, not drinking. You shall eat no chametz or seor. So with drinking wine, if people have wine, that at the end of the day, the air has yeast in it. You could never get rid of all yeast and all leaven, because you'd have to get rid of the air. So just highlighting that. It's a remembrance, a zakar, a memorial. This is a marker. Remembrance has to do with action. Pay attention, remember, recollect, mention, declare, recite, proclaim. We're telling the story, confess. We're confessing the story of of our deliverance and what happened, what took place. So we went over all that. This shows how in Scripture, remembering is always followed by action, the same way Shema, hearing and listening, is really followed by obeying. We went over the different words of who participates. The ger is one who's been grafted in, and they are now able to participate as a ger. And the Scripture also says the psalmist recognizes himself as a ger or a sojourner. So we are all seen as, Israel is all seen as the ger, and we must treat the sojourner with love and kindness. And bitter herbs. Eat the unleavened bread with bitter herbs. So we really focused on Exodus 12 and Exodus 13 last week. And these were all the different types of people when we look at who can and can't participate. The Ezrach, homeborn, Nekar, foreign and pagan, Ebed, slave, servant, Toshab, sojourner, and Sakir, hired servant. So, and the ger. So that's 6 different, basically one in covenant could participate and take place. That was 6 different types of people. And we're going to talk more about that today. We're going to get back to the leaven. Fluoride is used in rat poison. Wow. No kidding. Crazy. You get too much of that, I mean, it really is poison. You do not want to be brushing your teeth with that. 1 Corinthians 8:1. Removing leaven, we all possess knowledge, but knowledge puffeth up, while love builds up. So something that can become a not so good thing, knowledge, because it can cause arrogance. And certainly seen this as we come into the Torah, a lot of people in the law, the commandments, it really doesn't make us any better than anyone. And having that knowledge, it's a blessing. It's a blessing to get the Sabbath. It's a blessing to get the holy feast days. But we must not let it puff us up to become arrogant and proud. And that's a picture of what leaven does, is it puffs someone up so that they're full of pride. So we got to remove this puffing up. Now, knowledge is, of course, very important. It's said in Hosea that he desires the knowledge of Elohim. Knowing in the Hebrew roots, know is intimate. And you literally consummate and become one flesh. You know your husband or wife. And so know is a very important thing in our relationship with Yah, to have knowledge. But at the same time, mere knowledge can puff up, and that's one of the things that we must guard against. One of these things that I would point to is some people just get hung up on his name, and that's all they can preach, and you'll see that if you say Jesus one time, it's just they just want to hammer you. And, you know, so not everybody gets to that point where they're going to stop saying Jesus and say Yeshua or Yahshua or Yahushua. And, you know, they're just not going to change it. But they're going to still talk about their love for God and how good he is to us and all the blessings he's given us and how Jesus died for us. And you're going to have to stop right there and not try and correct them every time. Otherwise, you've become puffed up. You've become arrogant and proud, that you think that you're better than someone just saying his name in the Hebraic form. And that's one of the major ones, I would say. I mean, there's many. There's many. You're gonna have to come to their level and understand they're just not gonna all of a sudden stop saying Jesus because you say Yahshua or whatever variation you might say there. So knowledge puffs up. We have to guard against that as we get this knowledge, but we do want to know Yah intimately. How about the leaven of the Pharisees in Matthew 16? And when his disciples were come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread. Then Yahushua said unto them, Take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, It is because we have taken no bread. Which when Yahushua perceived, he said unto them, O ye of little faith, why reason ye among yourselves, because ye have brought no bread? Do ye not yet understand, neither remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000, and how many baskets ye took up? Neither the 7 loaves of the 4,000, and how many baskets ye took up? How is it that ye do not understand that I spake it not of you concerning bread, that ye should beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees? Then understood they how that he bade them not beware of the leaven of bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees. So here in Matthew we see a general doctrine. You know, we have to really still beware as we get the blessing of the commandments and the blessing of the Passover and biblical holy days. We must remove leaven. We must not have bad doctrine. We have to keep examining ourselves. And what even further than that, if we go over to Luke 12, we see even more. In the meantime, when there were gathered together an innumerable multitude of people, insomuch that they trode one upon another, he began to say unto his disciples, First of all, beware ye of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. So now we're getting deep. Now we're getting into it. The leaven of bad doctrine, false doctrine, lies, adding to the Torah, subtracting from the Torah. But the leaven of hypocrisy, the leaven of being a whited sepulcher, clean on the outside but not clean on the inside, being full of dead men's bones. Wow. So having 2 faces, being a fake, hypocrisy. This was the leaven of the Pharisees, it says. Their hypocrisy. Let's see. What else? Here we're going to see your glorying is not good. This is, of course, 1 Corinthians 5. 6 through 8. Know ye not that a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump? So the leaven was their pride, their glorying, their being proud about something that was actually sin, fornication, that they thought was something to be proud of. And of course we know the rest. Purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump as ye are unleavened. For even Messiah our Passover is sacrificed for us. Therefore let us keep the feast with the old leaven, not with the old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. So Paul tells us to literally keep the feast. And then our favorite book, Galatians 5. Have we read Galatians? Well, we'll share a verse. A little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. There it is, Galatians 5:9. And so the whole lump, you know, even a group of people. So this is why, you know, I think you go into churches, do you know how much leaven is in these churches? And it's like, you don't want to become leavened by the so much leaven in churches where it just infects you, because you think, well, I mean, almost every woman here is dressed inappropriately, tight clothing. They're rocking out. I mean, this is a show. And you know, all kinds of things that you could go on and on about. But at the end of the day, you know, Easter egg hunts, they don't cast out leaven every year. And so that obviously means they are going to have plenty of leaven, because it just keeps growing and growing and growing and is never removed from them. So, but in this context, actually, is the people who believed that were falling for what the Pharisees were teaching of being justified by the law, by the works of the law, being made righteous through the Torah. So in this context, we see where, again, as we get knowledge of the Torah and we get blessed with his commandments and we know him intimately better, that we could possibly fall for thinking we're justified by the Torah. And that's an important one of Galatians to understand, that people were believing they were getting justified by the works of the law and not by Messiah himself, with Messiah being our atonement. And without him, another one Paul brings together is the marital covenant that we'll get to, that he shows how, well, we've transgressed, we've broken the marriage contract, we're adulterers. How can he accept us back? How can we get brought back into covenant, as Ephraim was cut off and divorced? It's against Torah. We can't. What can he do? Well, Paul taught us that law of sin and death, and being married to another, as long as the one is alive, it's against Torah. But once a party dies, it requires the death of a party. And that's where Messiah comes in. That's where the covenant is restored and we're brought back into covenant. So Paul really teaches us some incredible things that without him, no doubt we would not understand these things. The Passover feast, let's see. Leviticus 23. Okay. This is getting more, continuing us back into the Torah here. And So we're gonna highlight more Torah, more being prepared. Now that we know we're not just we're not just thinking that, you know, the letter of the law can save us, or that we're going to do a perfect observance of all this, the jots and the tittles, but we're doing a memorial service. And if we get to it, we'll see examples of this in Scripture, of not doing it perfectly, but still doing it. So here we go. These are the feasts of the Lord, of Yahuwah, the Lord Yahuwah. These are his feasts. So that's one thing people will get tripped up on in the New Testament, is they'll see a feast of the Jews and they'll automatically think this stuff is Jewish. But it is not the Jewish. The Jews don't own these feasts. These are the feasts of the Lord. These are the feasts of Yahuwah. They're his feasts. Even holy convocations, which ye shall proclaim in their seasons. In the 14th day of the first month at evening is the Yahuwah's Passover. Yahuwah's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto Yahuwah. 7 days ye must eat unleavened bread, matzah. In the first day ye shall have an holy convocation, ye shall do no servile work therein. But ye shall offer an offering made by fire. And I highlighted that because we're going to get to, you know, this is not going to, may not be a jots and tittles. And this is more focused towards the priesthood, but the Levitical priests in Leviticus. But you shall offer an offering made by fire unto Yahuwah 7 days. In the 7th day is an holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein. So the first day is a holy convocation, and the last, the 7th day, is a high Sabbath. And an offering made by fire, the reason I highlighted that is because this can be a time, you know, to offer up a sacrifice. Or how about Exodus 23:14? 3 times thou shalt keep a feast unto me in the year. Thou shalt keep the feast of unleavened bread. Thou shalt eat unleavened bread 7 days, as I commanded thee in the time appointed of the month of Abib. For in it thou camest out from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty. And empty, what is that empty? Oh, some translations say, none shall appear before me empty-handed. So this is an important thing to think about. You know, it was a big preparation day yesterday, the 10th day of the first month, when Messiah came riding in on the donkey, and he was selected as the Passover lamb. And of course, Torah tells us to select a Passover lamb on the 10th day of the first month that would be slain and that would be roasted and eaten, but it had to be without blemish. So this inspection time is what we're in the midst of, and so we need to be thinking about this. What can we come to the feast? What can we offer to Yahuwah? How about Exodus 34 again? The feast of unleavened bread shalt thou keep. 7 days shalt thou eat unleavened bread, as I commanded thee in the time of the month of Abib. For in the month of Abib thou camest out from Egypt. All that openeth the matrix is mine, and every firstling among thy cattle, whether ox or sheep, that is male. But the firstling of an ass thou shalt redeem with a lamb. And if thou redeem him not, then thou shalt break his neck. All the firstborn of thy sons thou shalt redeem, and none shall appear before me empty. So there it is again, not appearing before him empty. And skipping down at the bottom, thou shalt not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leaven, neither shall the sacrifice of the feast of Passover be left until the morning. But here we see an offering made by fire in Leviticus 23, none appearing empty in Exodus 23 at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and again nobody appearing empty mentioned along with the Feast of Unleavened Bread and Passover. Well, let's see. One more. Deuteronomy 16. Observe the month of Abib, and keep the Passover unto Yahuwah thy Elohim, for in the month of Abib Yahuwah thy Elohim brought thee forth out of Egypt by night. Thou shalt therefore sacrifice the Passover unto Yahuwah thy Elohim, of the flock and the herd, in the place which Yahuwah shall choose to place his name there. Thou shalt eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days shalt thou eat unleavened bread therewith, even the bread of affliction. Here we see it called the bread of affliction. We talked about that. The ingredients are pretty much flour, water, and salt, the salt of the covenant. And, you know, a lot of sacrifices you weren't able to have honey in there or leaven. And some have even talked about honey acting as a leavening agent. Well, I've done that wrong then in the past, but just the bread of affliction. This is, you know, it's hard bread. It's not, I would say at least for the Passover meal with the lamb, I would make this the most basic bread and not be throwing in all kinds of yummy stuff. I would just do it basic. But this is the bread of affliction. For thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt in haste, that thou mayest remember the day when thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt all the days of thy life, and there shall be no leavened bread seen with thee in all thy coasts 7 days. Neither shall there anything of the flesh which thou sacrificedst the first day at evening remain all night until the morning. Thou mayest not sacrifice the Pesach within any of thy gates, which Yahuwah thy Elohim giveth thee, but at the place which Yahuwah thy Elohim, let's see, I need to scroll on that. Keep going. Okay, let's see. Where was I? But at the place which Yahuwah thy Elohim shall choose to place his name in, there thou shalt sacrifice the Pesach at evening, at the going down of the sun, at the season that thou camest forth out of Egypt. And thou shalt roast and eat it in the place which Yahuwah thy Elohim shall choose. And thou shalt turn in the morning and go unto thy tents. 6 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day shall be a solemn assembly to Yahuwah thy Elohim. Thou shalt do no work therein. So we see And Yah gave me the wisdom to understand that he places his name where he chooses, and that this does not say specifically Jerusalem or the tabernacle, although ultimately that would be for them the place of where they would have to go sacrifice the Passover lamb. However, the first Passover wasn't done in Jerusalem. So it becomes to cause us to ask the question, are we going to do really a jot and tittle exact replica perfection? No, I mean, really not. You're going to see that you're going to keep improving, Yah willing. To do the full, you can get pretty close on Passover in my opinion, but you do have to slaughter a lamb. You can replicate all the staff in hand, shoes on feet, go into your house. You can do all those things, the blood on the lintel or doorpost. Is the destroyer going to come at that night? Well, no, that happened that one time. So, you know, this is something for us to memorialize to the best of our abilities. But you definitely, I've only slaughtered the lamb the one time, and that was my first Passover, amazingly. So let's continue reading though. But this, I believe this can be done outside of Jerusalem. They did it in Gilgal as they were going into the promised land. They weren't at Jerusalem yet. They kept the Passover crossing the Jordan in Gilgal. So and that was after having just received the commandment. So we have to think about these things. Where is Yahuwah placing his name from year to year for us? Then it goes on to say the Feast of Weeks, to keep that. Let's see, I actually can. And then the Feast of Tabernacles, and then here it is, down to verse 16. Here we go. 3 times in a year shall all thy males appear before Yahuwah thy Elohim in the place which he shall choose, in the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and in the Feast of Weeks, and in the Feast of Tabernacles, and they shall not appear before Yahuwah empty. There it is again. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessing, Yahuwah thy Elohim, which he hath given thee. So here that we see that our giving is to be in correspondence or in relation to how Yahuwah has blessed us. And so there's no right or wrong amount of giving, and not coming to the feast empty-handed, but we must bring something. And in this, the other ones only said in Feast of Unleavened Bread, but this says in all the 3 main feasts. This, at a feast day, you do not come empty-handed. So what is this empty? Well, one of the first instances is Exodus 3:21. Before they leave Egypt, it says, "And I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and it shall come to pass that when ye go, ye shall not go empty. But every woman shall borrow of her neighbor and of her that sojourneth in her house jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment, and ye shall put them upon your sons and upon your daughters, and ye shall spoil, plunder the Egyptians. This is what they would not go out empty-handed, and we're remembering this. We're plundered full. We got all kinds of wonderful things that we take from Egypt when we go into freedom out of slavery. So this is that same Hebrew word. So there is a big connection there. It is rekam, emptily or vainly. Rekam, that's the Hebrew word being used for empty or empty-handed. And it talks about Yahuwah says, my word shall not return to me rekam. My word shall not return empty or vain or void, but it will accomplish everything I've commanded it to accomplish, or sent it forth to accomplish. So Yahuwah's word won't return rekam. And so empty-handed, we come prepared with something to a feast of Yah. That's absolutely necessary. Now maybe, your first time, okay, it's your first feast. You may just come and watch and learn, and you don't know what's going on. So you might have come empty-handed for the first one. But after you keep your first feast, I pretty much probably did when we killed the Passover lamb, my first Passover. I don't remember that I really brought anything other than myself, because I didn't know. And that was one of the first things I was taught. And so, but never to come empty-handed. Now, this is important to get this concept. John 11:55. We see, and here's where we see, and the Jews' Passover, or the Yahudim Pesach, and this is where people start thinking, well, these things are Jewish, is they only read the New Testament. And, well, why does it say that here? Well, my speculation, and I saw Shemaiah post this verse actually, is that there was also a northern kingdom feast days. So this was not Israel, which had been dispersed and scattered, and this was specifically in Judah, the kingdom of Judah, in the Yahudim. And the Yahudim preserved the original feast days, but the northern kingdom changed them and made them more pagan. And we see that the woman at the well, you won't worship on this mountain or in Jerusalem. But the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. Of course, the other view is that, well, it was a wrong not wrong calendar, but it was a different calendar, is another view. I won't be going into that view today. And many went out of the country up to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. So then sought they for Yahushua, and spake among themselves as they stood in the temple, what think ye that ye will come to the feast? And they're already planning to take him here. So we see that this is showing they went up early to Passover, very early, to cleanse themselves, purify themselves, inspect themselves, in case maybe they touched a dead body, or they somehow became ritually impure. Well, they would go up early and they would get pure. So if they would perhaps have touched a dead body, they would need 7 days purification. They'd have to go, you know, a week early. They'd have to go very early up to the feast. And they took this very seriously for them that wanted to be clean. So this is an important thing to consider, because the next chapter of John 12 says it was 6 days before Passover. Now, this is another important one, Numbers chapter 9, the second Passover. We'll read it. And Yahuwah spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, in the first month of the 2nd year after they were come out of the land of Egypt, saying, Let the children of Israel also keep the Passover at his appointed season. In the 14th day of this month at evening, ye shall keep it in its appointed season, according to all the rites of it, and according to all the ceremonies thereof shall ye keep it. And Moses spake unto the children of Israel that they should keep the Pesach. And they kept the Pesach on the 14th day of the first month at evening in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all that Yahuwah commanded Moses. So did the children of Israel. And there were certain men who were defiled by the dead body of a man, that they could not keep the Passover on that day. And they came before Moses and before Aaron on that day. And those men said unto him, We are defiled by the dead body of a man. Let's see. Let's try to scroll here. Stop. Did I pass it there? I think I passed it, but okay. And Yahuwah spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If any man of you or of your posterity shall be unclean by reason of a dead body, or be in a journey afar off, yet he shall keep the Passover unto Yahuwah in the 14th day of the 2nd month, instead of the 1st month. At even they shall keep it, and eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They shall leave none of it unto the morning, nor break any bone of it. According to all the ordinances of the Passover, they shall keep it. But the man that is clean and is not in a journey, and forbeareth to keep the Passover, even the same soul shall be cut off from among his people, because he brought not the offering of Yahuwah in his appointed season. That man shall bear his sin. And if a stranger shall sojourn among you, and will keep the Passover unto Yahuwah according to the ordinance of the Pesach, and according to the manner thereof, so shall he do. Ye shall have one ordinance, both for the stranger and for him that is born in the land. So here we see this event was so important that it involved a second opportunity, that everyone must do this if they want to be a part of covenant Israel. And I think that this is also significant in that really there would be 2 Passovers. There would be 2 deliverances. And this is a major thing, because when you're trying to put it together, it's, are we delivered from Egypt? are we just delivered in Messiah? Forget Egypt? Or is there there's two events? So I think that that's one of the significances of the second Passover is there would be a second Passover, and that second Passover would be Messiah paying the price. So here would be an example of, you know, they missed the first one, and that's why they would go up early and purify themselves. So they would be going up way early to the feast. Numbers 33, as far as the different calendar goes, you know, Messiah in the Last Supper was not the Passover meal. This would be Monday evening. It would be the evening before. And, you know, well, what about, maybe we have something wrong here. Maybe they ate it at evening before the 14th day. Maybe we're reading something wrong, and then they left during the day of the 14th. Well, Numbers 33:3 says, and they departed from Ramesses in the first month on the 15th day of the first month, on the morrow after the Passover. So there's no question as to when they slaughtered the Passover lamb. They left Egypt on the high Sabbath, the 15th day, and there's nothing to be confused about really here. And in the Gospel of John, we see clearly that, let's see, whoops, not that. There's John 12. We know the days exactly. 6 days before Passover, and then the next day, he's chosen as the spotless lamb. We know the days exactly. He's fulfilling the calendar that is in use. You know, no question about it. We can count the days down. So this is something that I didn't fully say last video, and I wanted to be a little more specific. I can't always correct everything in a video. I've said a lot of things on a lot of different videos, and if people aren't following along, they may have thought that I was saying that Messiah ate the Passover meal with his disciples. But the Last Supper wasn't the Passover meal, and John even makes clear that the Last Supper was finished, the Passover not yet happening, and there's a lot of detail in John that shows us that at least the calendar that was being used, Messiah became the Passover lamb on the calendar being used, no question. And I know that in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it sounds as though Messiah could have been going to eat the Passover, but at the same time, they were preparing to eat the Passover. They were intending to eat it. He did eat with them on preparation day, the evening before the Passover. But the intent was there, but he became the Passover lamb on the time when they would slaughter the lamb. And then the next day would be the high Sabbath. No question about it. And Matthew, Mark, and Luke all agree, and they say, now it was the day of preparation, and when Messiah was slain. And there's no question about when the preparation day is. The preparation day is they're preparing to leave Egypt. A preparation day is always the day before Sabbath, Friday. That's the preparation day. It's always the day before the Sabbath. So Messiah was no question slain on the preparation day, becoming the Passover lamb on the 14th of the calendar that was being used. And I don't see there being enough. If there were two different calendars, there was the same calendar. They were on the same day, because otherwise Matthew, Mark, and Luke wouldn't be going from saying, and he ate the Passover, and and it was the day of preparation. They all agree, and none of them say anything about a different calendar, or no indication. So as far as the calendar that was in use that Messiah fulfilled, the Last Supper with his disciples was not the Passover meal. It was the night before. And so now we know, with the Passover falling on Tuesday night, this would mean that Monday night would be when the Last Supper would happen. So actually, this is something to take into consideration. Let's see, what else do we have here? Now this is back to the olive branch, and this makes a very good point of why the Last Supper. Now I do believe the Last Supper is very intimately connected to Passover, close enough that we can say that it is Passover, but it wasn't the lamb meal. And let's see if I can, there we go, the wedding covenant meal. In ancient Hebrew wedding model, both parties would have a covenant meal once the ketubah had been finalized. The meal would involve bread and wine. The ketubah would include the bride price amount. So this is a big thing. When they're having this bread and wine, they're talking about the price. What's the price? Well, we know the price was Messiah's body, his blood. That was the cost. That was the price to be paid to bring us back into covenant. This is where Paul talks about the law of sin and death. How can we be brought back into covenant? It's against Torah for us to remarry Yahuwah. There has to be bloodshed. So this makes sense that the covenant meal must first take place with the bread and the wine before the price could actually be paid. This is the process. The groom and his father would come to the door of the bride's family and knock on the door. The door being opened would signify that the terms of marriage had been accepted. So this is the way of it. This is the way of a wedding covenant. This is what's taking place with Messiah and us. He's having this special covenant meal. And what is this? Let's see. See if I have anything else here. The covenant meal. A shared meal mutually consisting of bread and wine, signifying the covenant partners have become one. We break one loaf of bread, and we each place a piece of that bread into our covenant partner's mouth, demonstrating that a part of us has gone into the other. Drinking wine from a common cup indicates our blood has gone into each other, Since life is in the blood, we are demonstrating that we have taken the other's life into ourselves. Modern example, the feeding the cake. You know, the groom always takes off a piece of cake and puts it in his wife's mouth, and she does the same, and they cross the arms, and they each put a piece of cake in each other's mouth. And this happens. Now, this should happen before they consummate. So this is a prior step. And so in logic, it makes sense that this covenant meal had to happen before, as the symbol of what Messiah would actually fulfill on Passover day. When the lamb would be slain, he would actually become the lamb. So this is confirming that the Last Supper was not the actual Passover meal, because this becomes a huge topic of debate, and people say that's adding to Torah. That they would have been breaking Torah if they did that, and where is this in Torah? And this is the Passover, and we'll be drinking his blood and eating his flesh unworthily if we do this in another manner. And I beg to differ, but it goes on to say the Jewish wedding covenant, it's a man leaves father and mother, is united to his wife, they become one flesh. The Jewish marriage had 3 steps, and it goes over that. The contract, see if I can show this, scroll through it. The contract, legal marriage by signing a written contract, the ketubah. And we know that this is reflected in the feast days. A 3-step process. Here we see the consummation, the chuppah, and the celebration, it says. And so it gives the 3-step process, and we see that in the feast days. We see the price, the price paid with the Passover lamb and the spring feasts. We see the ketubah really written and given at Shavuot, and then we see the consummation. So it's very similar. We see a 3-step process taking place. So this just makes sense. I hope it's making sense to everyone else. Whoops, that wasn't the correct thing. And Olive Branch Fellowship helped me with this. So let's see, I think that's all the slides. So from there, I will get to what is this in Torah though, and should we then disconnect? I mean, should we say, well, we should have the Last Supper then, and we should forget the Passover because Messiah instituted a new thing, and it's just different, and we shouldn't keep the Passover. It's 2 different things. No, they're still very, very intimately connected together, because he would say, you know, at the Last Supper, this is about me. This is the covenant meal of me giving myself, and here I'm going to become the Passover lamb at Passover. And so these 2 things are very intimately connected, and we must do both things. But if we really want to remember the Last Supper properly, it's the night before Passover. It's the night before he would become the Passover lamb. And I'm going to be going to the chronological Gospels, life and 70-week ministry of Messiah, what he says. He says that about the night when they took bread and broke it and blessed it, he says, Yahushua spoke the blessing with which the Melchizedek or Melchizedek blessed the Most High when he brought forth bread and wine to Abraham when he returned from the slaughter of the kings. This is the same blessing that Abraham taught Yitzhak, who taught Jacob, who taught his 12 sons. So Abraham teaches Isaac, teaches Jacob, teaches his 12 sons. And this has been preserved as a blessing. Who still speak this blessing every Shabbat over the bread. And this is the case. This has been preserved. They still do this, at least in Judaism, the Jewish people. So every Shabbat, so really every time we're doing the bread and wine, we are remembering Messiah. He is our bread. He is our food. And of course, we would remember him every time. But they say this blessing every Shabbat. Baruch atah Yahuwah Eloheinu melech ha'olam ha'motzi lechem min ha'eretz. Blessed are you, Yahuwah, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. And this was something I really appreciated, that they did exactly this with the blessing when I was down in Fort Myers. They did the bread and the wine. And they did it, I think, both Friday night and Saturday in the day. So we did it twice together on Sabbath. And they said the blessing. Yahushua then explained that this had always, even from the time of the Melchizedek, represented his body, which would be the provision for our ultimate healing. So this is Torah. This is in Torah. And the bread and the wine, back to the days of Abraham, when Abraham did this with Melchizedek. Remember, we know Melchizedek is a foreshadowing of Messiah, priest after the order of Melchizedek. That's what he does. He becomes the priest after the order of Melchizedek. He breaks the bread and wine with his disciples as the covenant meal, this is a different thing than the Passover. It's a separate thing. Abraham had indeed seen Yahushua's day in the representation of the shed blood and the broken body that the Melchizedek shared with him. Abraham rejoiced and laid a tenth of his vast wealth at the feet of the priest of the Most High Elohim. After the bread, Yahushua took the cup and blessed the Most High with the blessing that Melchizedek blessed the Elohim of Abraham. Baruch atah Yahuwah Eloheinu melech ha'olam, borei priye ha'gefen. Blessed are you, Yahuwah, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine. This represents the payment for the broken blood covenant that we entered into at Mount Sinai. There's the payment we talked about. Blood covenant. Broken requires blood. And it would be Messiah's blood. We broke the covenant ratified with the blood of bulls, and for that transgression the guilty party must die. So we should have died. We were guilty. Yeshua, who never once violated that covenant, offered himself and died in our place through the substitutionary payment of the death penalty, which is the curse for breaking the blood covenant. He can renew that covenant with us write the Torah on our hearts and actually live in us through the gift of the Holy Spirit. So Messiah, before he died, Messiah was what? Completely unleavened. No sin. He was perfect. No leaven in him. Which kind of makes us think, are we working to be unleavened before we die? That's a good thing to think about. We're continuing working on that up until the day we die, of getting rid of leaven and becoming unleavened. And self-inspecting. We're in a self-inspection time. What else? Okay, where are we at? An hour and 25 minutes. One more thing I want to read, and this is out of Restoration by Todd Bennett. Scriptural Restoration. So I hope that made sense, everything that I said there. By now it should be clear to the reader that not only has society been compromised by pagan influences, but so has the religion of Christianity. In the same fashion that the Pantheon, a Greek temple dedicated to the worship of all gods, was converted to a Christian church in 607 AD, that's the Pantheon, Greek temple, converted into a Christian church. Talk about blending. So too, we see that much church doctrine and tradition have been built upon a pagan foundation. This is the same thing that happened to Yisrael and Yahudah, and the scriptures offer numerous examples of restoration that they experienced after falling away. These examples are helpful to those who currently desire restoration because they provide a blueprint and a pattern. One example of restoration can be seen in King Hezekiah, whose proper Hebrew name is Chezkiyahu. Chezkiyahu means Yah has strengthened him. Yah is the poetic short form for the true name of Elohim, which is rarely used any longer. Chezkiyahu was the 12th king of Yahudah and ascended the throne around 726 BC. Let us read how he restored the kingdom during his reign. And this is 2 Chronicles 29, verse 1. Chezkiyahu became king when he was 25 years old, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abiyah, the daughter of Zechariah, and he did what was right in the sight of Yahuwah, according to all that his father David had done. In the first year of his reign, in the first month, he opened the doors of the house of Yahuwah and repaired them. And I'm not going to read all of this. They sanctify the house and the holy place. They cleanse it. They do a cleansing. And he desires to, in verse 10, Hezekiah says, "Now it is in my heart to make a covenant with Yahuwah Elohim of Yisrael." So Hezekiah wants to make a covenant. What is this? Well, you know, Moses had the covenant, and Moses really renewed the covenant at Moab before they go into the land after their 40 years of wandering. And now Hezekiah, he's making a covenant with Yahuwah? Is this going to be the new covenant? Well, no, it's just going to be renewing the covenant to keep the original covenant. So we see that about Hezekiah. He makes a covenant with Yahuwah. And then verse 15, and they gathered their brethren, sanctified themselves, and went according to the commandment of the king at the words of Yahuwah to cleanse the house of Yahuwah. So they had to do a great cleansing first. Hopefully we're cleansing ourselves for Passover. And then skipping to verse 17, now they began to sanctify on the first day of the first month, and on the 8th day of the month they came to the vestibule of Yahuwah. So they sanctified the house of Yahuwah in 8 days. And on the 16th day of the first month they finished. They cleansed all the house of Yahuwah. But notice the 16th day of the first month, that's after Passover, where they had accomplished that. It says the assembly brought 70 bowls. Thought that was interesting. The number 70. I'm skipping over a big section. And let's see. Do I want to skip all that? Yes. That was 2 Chronicles 29, 1 through 36. And then he says, the scriptures record that King Hezekiah did what was right in the eyes of Yahuwah. He opened the doors of the house of Yahuwah, and he repaired them. The temple service had been shut down, and he proceeded to cleanse the house and restore the priestly service, the temple service, and Davidic worship. Next, King Hezekiah proceeded to keep the appointed times of Yahuwah, which are prescribed in the scriptures. Now, this is the next chapter 30, verse 1. And Hezekiah sent to all Yisrael and Yehudah, and also wrote letters to Ephraim and Manasseh, that they should come to the house of Yahuwah at Yerushalayim, to keep the Passover to Yahuwah Elohim of Yisrael. So he's inviting the lost tribes, the lost sheep of Israel. For the king and his leaders and all the assembly in Yerushalayim had agreed to keep the Passover in the 2nd month. So here we see that second Passover they're going to keep, because they didn't get all cleansed in time for the first Passover. And I'm going to be skipping ahead again. I underlined the phrase in verse 8. Now do not be stiff-necked as your fathers were, but yield yourselves to Yahuwah and enter his sanctuary, which he has sanctified forever, and serve Yahuwah your Elohim, that the fierceness of his wrath may turn away from you. Okay. Now many people of very great assembly, verse 13, gathered at Yerushalayim to keep the feast of unleavened bread in the 2nd month. They arose and took away the altars that were in Yerushalayim, and they took away all the incense altars and cast them into the brook Kidron. And then verse 18. For a multitude of the people, many from Ephraim, Manasseh, Issachar, and Zebulun, had not cleansed themselves. Yet they ate the Passover contrary to what was written. Here's a biblical example of grace being given, where they did not keep the Passover to the jots and the tittles. They weren't even clean. They weren't even ritually pure and should not have been able to eat the Passover, yet they do, contrary to what is written. So here we're going to see an example of, let's do this to the best of our abilities. But Hezekiah prayed for them, saying, May the good Yahuwah provide atonement for everyone who prepares his heart to seek Elohim, Yahuwah Elohim of his fathers, though he is not cleansed according to the purification of the sanctuary. And Yahuwah listened to Hezekiah and healed the people. So the children of Yisrael who were present at Jerusalem kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days with great gladness, and the Levites and the priests praised Yahuwah day by day, singing to Yahuwah accompanied by loud instruments. Let's see, the last verse, 27. Then the priests, the Levites, arose and blessed the people, and their voice was heard, and their prayer came up to his holy dwelling place to heaven. His dwelling place in heaven. Now let's remember that about where Yahuwah has caused his name to dwell is in us. We are the temple. So really, again, it would say, well, you can't slaughter the Passover within any of your gates. Well, you're going to have to choose somebody's gates to do it. And at the end of the day, you know, we are the dwelling place. His name is to dwell in us. We are to be the temple. But we see the forgiveness of people that ate of it, and they were forgiven that they didn't do it according to the jots and the tittles of the Torah. And this is how we are pretty much memorializing it. Yes, we should try our best to get it as perfect as we can, but we're not going to get it exact. This is the mark of true restoration. The people had a powerful desire to obey the word of Elohim. They did not just talk about being obedient, their words were supported by action. They rejoiced in doing what was right, and their zeal was so great that they went above and beyond what was prescribed in the word. When they were finished celebrating, they went and cleansed the land of all the worship of false gods. Now, 2 Chronicles 31, 1 through 3. The king also appointed a portion of his possessions for the burnt offerings, for the morning and evening burnt offerings, and the burnt offerings for the Sabbaths and the new moons, which is the Rosh Chodesh, and the set feasts, as it is written in the Torah of Yahuwah. So they kept the second Passover. A second one is in 2 Kings 22, which is Josiah. Yoshiyahu was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Yedidah, the daughter of Adaiah of Bazakat, and he did what was right in the sight of Yahuwah, and walked in all the ways of his father David. He did not turn aside to the right hand or to the left. Skipping down to verse 8. Then Hilkiah the high priest said to Shaphan the scribe, I have found the scroll of the Torah in the house of Yahuwah. And Hilkiah gave the scroll to Shaphan, and he read it. So Shaphan the scribe went to the king, bringing the king word, saying, Your servants have gathered the money that was found in the house, and have delivered it into the hand of those who do the work, who oversee the house of Yahuwah. Then Shaphan the scribe showed the king, saying, Hilkiah the priest has given me a scroll. And Shaphan read it before the king. Now it happened when the king heard the words of the scroll of the Torah that he tore his clothes. Then the king commanded Hilkiah the priest, skipping to verse 13, Go inquire of Yahuwah for me, for the people, and for all Yahudah, concerning the words of this scroll that has been found. For great is the wrath of Yahuwah that is aroused against us, because our fathers have not obeyed the words of this scroll to do according to all that is written concerning us. So Hilkiah the priest went to Huldah the prophetess, and they spoke with her. Then she said to them, Thus says Yahuwah Elohim of Yisrael, tell the man who sent you to me, thus says Yahuwah, behold, I will bring calamity on this place and on its inhabitants, all the words of the scroll which the king of Yahudah has read, because they have forsaken me and burned incense to other gods, that they might provoke me to anger with all the works of their hands. Therefore my wrath shall be aroused against this place and shall not be quenched. But as for the king of Yahudah who sent you to inquire of Yahuwah, in this manner you shall speak to him. Thus says Yahuwah Elohim of Yisrael, concerning the words which you have heard, because your heart was tender, and you humbled yourself before Yahuwah, when you heard what I spoke against this place and against its inhabitants, that they would become a desolation and a curse, and you tore your clothes and wept before me, I also have heard you, says Yahuwah. Surely, therefore, I will gather you to your fathers, and you shall be gathered to your grave in peace, and your eyes shall not see all the calamity which I will bring on this place. So they brought back word to the king. Now the king sent them to gather all the elders of Yahudah and Yerushalayim to him. The king went up to the house of Yahuwah with all the men of Yahudah, and with him all the inhabitants of Yerushalayim, the priests, the prophets, and all the people, both small and great. And he read in their hearing all the words of the scroll of the covenant which had been found in the house of Yahuwah. Then the king stood by a pillar and made a covenant. Same thing. Hezekiah made a covenant. Josiah makes a covenant. And remember, Joshua, son of Nun, also made a covenant when they entered the land. So this gives us, I think, a better understanding of the Messianic covenant with Yahushua, of how it's really renewing and restoring us. I would still call it the new covenant. There's nothing better than Messiah's blood covenant. Nothing is going to surpass that. But yet, why would we renew this year by year, or even Shabbat by Shabbat, to eat his blood and drink, eat his flesh and drink his blood, the bread and the wine? Well, renewing that from time to time shows that, you know, we still have sin, just as they had here. They had to renew the covenant, and they kept failing. Well, both Hezekiah and Josiah renew the covenant. They make a covenant before Yahuwah. But what is it for? To follow Yahuwah and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all his heart and all his soul, to perform the words of this covenant that were written in this scroll. And all the people took a stand for the covenant. So the scroll, the book of the covenant, Moses. And the king commanded Hilkiah, the priest of the second order, and the doorkeepers to bring out the house of Yahuwah all the articles that were made for Baal, for Asherah, and for all the host of heaven, and he burned them. And we see Ashtoreth, so Ashtoreth, that's Easter. That's modern day Easter. Ashtor, Ishtar, Easter. It's the same thing. Ashtoreth, down in verse 13 of this chapter. In 2 Kings 23 verse 13, we see Ashtoreth, the abomination of the Sidonians. So Easter was destroyed at this time and ruined and wrecked. And then verse 21, then the king commanded all the people, saying, keep the Passover to Yahuwah your Elohim, as it is written in the scroll of the covenant. Such a Passover surely had never been held since the days of the judges who judged Yisrael, nor in all the days of the kings of Yisrael and the kings of Yahudah. But in the 18th year of King Yoshiyahu, this Passover was held before Yahuwah in Yerushalayim. Moreover, Yoshiyahu put away those who consulted mediums and spiritists, the household gods and idols, all the abominations that were seen in the land of Yahudah and in Yerushalayim, that he might perform the words of the Torah which were written in the scroll, that Hilkiah the priest found in the house of Yahuwah. Now before him there was no king like him, who turned to Yahuwah with all his heart, with all his soul, and with all his might, according to all the Torah of Moshe. Nor after him did any arise like him. 2 Kings 22, 1 through 23, 25. So we see that, and that's it. That's an hour and 45. Wow. This seems I can't keep these things hardly under 2 hours, but that hopefully prepares us. We see this covenant renewal concept, and that we remember this yearly, because what ultimately was that covenant meal about? It was about his body. He would be the Passover lamb. His blood would be spilled the very following day from the Last Supper. And he pays the price for us to be his bride, for us to be the bride of Messiah and to be his people and to be brought back into covenant. The price is paid through his blood. Now, we see that the same language is used when we come to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And we see the covenant being affirmed at covenant time at Pentecost, when the outpouring of the Ruach HaKodesh took place. So covenant renewal, covenant terms, covenant remembrance. And we see in Revelation that the marriage supper of the Lamb is pictured in the fall feasts. So we're not all the way there. The price is paid for us to be all the way there, but we're still trying to get there. So this is not all fulfilled as they would deceive and have you believe, that it's fulfilled, therefore we should not try to keep Torah. So yes, amen, Shemaiah. In remembrance of him. So there we have it. That wraps it up. Tabernacle was also raised on the first of the first month. Yes, 8 days significant. Shabbat Shalom, Wendy Russell. But that wraps it up. I'm going to go ahead and let everyone go to get your rest for Shabbat. Blessings. I hope this blessed you. I hope that this made sense. I hope this prepares us to not come empty-handed and to be as cleansed of leaven as we possibly can be. So we'll see you on the next one. Blessings in Yahushua. Amen.